your thought process on when you decided to create it? Like, what were you thinking about at the time in 2015 when you decided to create the bill?
Well, it actually goes back in time further than 2015.
Wow.
It starts with 2003. Actually,
Ooh.
I started trying to do things on the public education committee regarding schools that were failing, because in 2002 I had that was Wheatley's 75th anniversary, and what I did was I had an event called the Purple and White Gala. It was a gala honoring all the Miss Wheatleys up to 2002. And what I did is I got their pictures and I got their bios and I put it on a wall. And fortunately, AT&T was the company that sponsored the breakfast for me so that I could get them all together. But what I noticed was the earlier Miss Wheatleys all had significant educational accomplishments and had employment that was absolutely superb. As I got closer to the 80s and into the 90s, and certainly into the beyond that, I recognized that the accomplishments of the Miss Wheatleys was basically in the tape. And so I decided to go take a further look, and I started looking at the schools in my district. I started with the two high schools, Casmer High School and Wheatley High School. Wheatley, graduate of Wheatley, and so that was why it became important. I live in Casmer Garden, so that was why that was important. But the fact is, they were in my district, and what I decided to do is I looked at Casmer. I saw that Casmer had been low performing and failing for almost 5, 6, 7, 8 school years. And I thought, well, what's that? And so I went and looked further, and then I realized that it was because they hadn't done well on the math portion of the standardized test. Well, I went a little bit further to look at why. And what I realized and what I found out was that they didn't have a certified math teacher at Casmer teaching any of these students. And so even though Casmer was failing, nobody had ever tried or desired to put a certified math teacher in there so they could help these students. And so I started asking around about why, if the HIC had certified math teachers, why would they never put one at Casmer? Well, some of the school board members thought, well, they didn't, it wasn't their problem because that wasn't the area they represented. And I said, no, you represent all of HIC. You may get elected in a certain area, but you represent all of HIC. They disagreed with that. And so what I did is I talked to the committee chair who was doing a bill on turnover, on campus turnovers and responses. And so I talked to him and I explained it to him, and he said, well, how would you fix it? I said, well, look, I think if we have a amendment that just says if one campus in a school district is failing for 5 consecutive school years, then TEA can come in and take over the whole district. He said, Harold, that's strong, but that ought to get their attention. I said, yeah, I think so.
Wow.
Well, for the most part, it did. Because this bill affected not only HIC, but all 1,200 school districts at the time. Just before this bill was passed, there were 190 campuses in Texas that were failing campuses. After House Bill 1842 passed with the amendment on it, that number went down to 77.
Wow.
And so districts started to do something about it. Unfortunately, what HIC did is nothing when it came to the chronically underperforming schools, the schools that have been failing the longest. I suspect they did something to help some of the schools, but the schools that were failing the longest in Northeast Houston, HIC did nothing to it. And so they had the opportunity in 2019. Wheatley was the school that had failed the longest. Cashmere had actually come out of failure and gotten a C. It's since now gone back into failure, and Wheatley now is the school that is the failure. There's some other schools, elementary schools now that exist. One in particular, Highland Heights. It is currently 4 failures the school year, and if HID didn't turn it around, it was also going to trigger a takeover. And so that's what my thoughts were at the start of this. But I tell you what my real thoughts were, was that HID and no other school district would ever let a school fail for 5 consecutive school years. I just didn't believe that. I thought that they would do something, and whatever they had to do, turn that school around. And so that's how we got here.
Yeah. And, with everything that has happened, do you feel somewhat like responsible for the outcome?
Why would I be responsible?
Yeah.
I mean, that's like saying the guy who comes with the ambulance to pick up the guy who was shot is somehow another responsible.
Yes.
It's HID's responsibility to educate students. And when they let them fail, they should suffer the punishment.
Yes. What would it take? What does it take to represent a district this size? So I know we're focusing on the future. So what types of qualities or experience is necessary to keep a district afloat, or at least to, have it bounce back and become successful in the way that we want the district to be?
Well, don't let the school fail. HID knows full well how that if you need to put a certified math teacher in a school, they know how to do that, I think. Now, whether they take the opportunity to do that, I'm not sure. But and obviously they don't. But the way you keep it from failing is you provide the kind of resources to it that you need to keep it from being that it doesn't fail for 5 consecutive school years.
Yes. And what can you say TEA will bring to the table that the school boards could not, especially with a district so large?
Well, I don't think large has anything to do with student outcomes. I think that what's going to happen with the board of managers is that the schools that have largely not been getting the kind of resources brought to them that they need, so they're not consistently failing, they're going to get that. And that's what I think is going to happen. That's what I'm hoping happens anyway.
Yes.
But the thing,
continue.
I know for sure, we can't stay where we are.
Yeah.
Because we're going to keep getting what we've been getting.
Can the law that was allowed for the takeover to happen be changed? And would you consider creating another law to overturn this type of action?
No.
Gotcha.
As long as we have, why would I do that for failing schools? I mean, if we're going to change and create more options to deal with failing schools, we ought to deal with more options for these kids who we failed, who have gone out and done dumb things, engaged in criminal activity because we simply didn't educate them. We ought to create more options for them. They've been convicted, and many of them been sentenced. Many of them have very few in the way of options in front of them that are positive. And we've left them with a bunch of negative alternatives, and yet we're looking for options for HID. Come on, that don't make sense.
Say, if the takeover of HID by the state was not on the table to improve the performance of the district, what other alternative would be on the table?
Well, you got to realize that before you get to the options of the takeover, I'll just talk to you about what I did. back in 2003, I just told you about some of the problems I found.
Yes.
And what I did is I created a bill that would have allowed HISD to be divided into four subparts, and each subpart would elect a superintendent. Well, that bill failed.
Mm.
Later, what I did is I looked around and I saw the number of failing schools in Texas. And so what I tried to do was create what I call the Texas Opportunity School District, where we would take all the failing schools and put them into the school district, have the state manage them, have the state get them all fitted out, refitted, and then return them back to the school district they came from. Well, that bill made it to the House floor, but it failed because, and largely because of the people whose districts included the failing schools.
Mhm.
And so I'm not sure what other option you can do.
Yeah. And I've been able to talk to a lot of, parents and teachers and students on ground, and um do you and some of them feel like this is all very political. It's all very politicized. And do you feel
No,
d-
no, it's not. It has nothing to do with politics, man. It has
okay.
to do with failing schools.
Mhm.
I don't know why people don't want to recognize that because HID didn't have to be in this trap.
Mhm.
HID could have said, we're going to fix the doggone school. And if they had done that, then it would have gone away. Then it would have been it.
Mhm.
But I don't know. I represent people sometimes charged with major crimes. But
Mhm.
just because they don't like the law doesn't mean we need to.
And I'm just the messenger. And so
Okay.
what do you want to say to concern about
Are they
this news in
failing
general?
schools? The what?
The concern about
The what?
the no concern about this TEA takeover.
Well,
What
they should be concerned about failing schools, about not giving kids a future, about sentencing kids to the point where they end up having nothing but negative options in their future, in their lives, and their children's future.
Mhm.
That's what we ought to be concerned about.
Yes. And do you have any other final words that I haven't already asked already that you would like to share with our readers?
Well, I hope they will get on HIC
Mhm.
and look at them for why didn't they follow the law and why here's a law that affects every school district in the state. Why is HID the only one screaming and yelling that they don't like the law? And when the law was passed,
Mhm.
the NAACP was for it, the AFL-CIO was for it, the American Federation of Teachers Union was for it, everybody was for it. And you know why I suspect? I suspect they were all for it for the same reason I was, because we never thought they would that anybody would let a school fail for 5 consecutive school years. And that's why they were for it, because they never thought that would happen.
Yes.
But today, they're saying all kinds of things because, you know, they don't want to own up to the fact that we've destroyed these children's lives by failing them educationally. And we ought to be guilty. We ought to be guilty of a crime